Trust that it'll always work with the good old just power on, power off, right?
Sorry, we were a little bit late going live because the live wouldn't start.
There was technical problems.
It was like live, and then we started talking. I'm like, I don't think we're actually live.
You felt like you almost know intuitively something else should have
is
happened
off,
here.
and I'm like, I'm not going to spend like 20 minutes, and then realizing it didn't even work. Because see, now it says live up in the corner as well.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah, so this is basically the first live that I've done on my account, I think. So
this is big. This is big.
This is big. So I have my chaperone here, Ross, joining the live as well. Just for like emotional support. No, no, but we're recording the second update as well for our prep series, right?
So while we've got you guys here, we've also got a camera on the computer here recording this for the YouTube video as well. So if you missed this, then you can always catch that later as well, or if you have to bow out.
Yes. So I guess, yeah, the purpose of this live is just to kind of update everyone on how the prep is going and any kind of challenges that we've had so far. So yeah.
Take it away. Ladies first. This is your live. You own this. It's all you.
No. Yeah, no, but
well, let's start
how many weeks in are we now? That's a good place to start because
well, I just submitted my 10-week check-in to Cal, but we've kind of been looking at it almost in reverse order because anytime he sends me the check-in feeding back, and he probably does the same with you, he's like, right, 12 and a half weeks out, 13 weeks out. So my last check-in email from how much will the next one will come in this week is we're just under 12 weeks out now.
Well, the diet started for us 28th of March. So just start of April. So what's that? April, May, we've already been dieting for like 2.5 months technically. Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to talk about is a little bit like the process in terms of the adjustments and things and where we started. So like to give you an idea, at the end of my bulk or the building phase in terms of calories, I got up to about 2,000, I think it was 2,800 that I got up to on my training days, which was pretty good. And then my diet started at 2,400 and 2,280 because in between the kind of top calorie target, I did a mini cut, went for holiday, and then as I come back, we had about a month to build calories up again, and then boom into the diet. So it was starting quite conservatively, 2,422, and the response has kind of been consistent but quite slow. But now things are starting to really happen. I'm starting to really feel it. So yeah, like now I'm down to 1,850 and 1,650. So yeah. Gives you an idea, but it's been basically like adjustments almost every week since the diet started, either cardio or calorie wise. So yeah.
Suppose I showed you. Can I share about mine?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess with mine, I have to say we've had quite different experiences so far through the prep, only in the sense of how the body's responded. Now I have to say for the first literally 7-8 weeks for me, it was just boom, 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 boom.
Like Ross was dropping like 0.7, 0.8, like a kilo a week, and I had like 0.1 on a good week. But I don't stress about that though, because I always have the attitude, you do what needs to be done, you tick the boxes, and then you just monitor the responses, and things will fall into place.
100%. So I guess what was your starting weight and what is it now?
As my starting weight of the diet was 61.5, so just under 62 was as high as I got up
now
to.
You are?
Now I am down to 57.8 has been my lowest reading, so only about 4 kilos.
Yeah,
right?
Doesn't sound like too bad, right? Whereas I started, and I'll just do a bit of a summary of mine now. So I started off at 87.3 average weight, although I did top out a little bit higher than that. 87.5 was the highest scale weight I recorded ahead of starting this. In terms of where I was calories wise, and then sorry guys, I'm doing this on my phone while I'm at it. I started off at 3,620 calories on training days and 2,040 on 3,180 on non-training days. So needless to say, I was loving life. I was on 550 grams of carbs, for example, on training days, 350 on non-training days. So life was pretty good at that point in time. In terms of starting body weight, like I said, I was 87.3 average weight. By the time we were at literally the time of recording this week I'm at a bit of a swoosh down. So I've dropped down to 81.8. So it's been around about 6 kilos for me in the process so far, which for 9-10 weeks into the prep, we kind of targeted right at the start that we would ideally want, like between Cal and I, wanted around about a 0.5 to 0.7 drop average per week, and this kind of went in that direction. And that's, to be honest, with 2 weeks where weight just stayed pretty much the same, and we kind of gave it a chance to see how things would go. But, you know, at the end of the day, plateaus are inevitable in this process. So we made the most recent calorie adjustment, and where I'm currently sitting now from where I started was 2,540 calories on training days and 2,040 on non-training days. So as you can imagine, I'm now down over 1,100 calories each on training and non-training days from where I started the diet.
Whereas for me, I'm down about 500 from where the diet started.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a smaller human, smaller person, so the adjustments are not going to be as big. But it's just finding that sweet spot, I guess, like, you know, where I'm dropping at an approved rate. So Carlos now said he wants me to drop with 0.6 to 0.7 kilo a week, which
for you is quite significant.
Which is really freaking fast. And it's going to be a really hard month. It's going to be a really hard couple of weeks. But then the plan is to have a bit of a refeed, a bit of an increase in calories. So yeah, like mentally, I'm ready for it. I can definitely feel the hunger coming in now. Like yesterday, I was quite hungry. But, you know, it's nothing that I'm not prepared to go through. So
you know what you sign up for, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing is as well, it's probably good for you to touch on, where was your cardio and training at the start and where is it now?
It's a cardio, the bane of my life. Like I've had between 2 or 3 cardio sessions, like in the building phase throughout. And that was hard for me. I was like, I hate this. And then literally as soon as the diet started in April, it was like, okay, we're going to do, I think it was 20 or 25 minutes daily. So it went from like 2-3 times a week to daily, which I think I've said I had like nightmares that night. That's how much I hate cardio. I think it's so boring. And then now it's up to 35 minutes daily, but it's I get why he's doing it. And, you know, I only train as well in the gym 4 days a week. So, you know, the cardio is low stress. Maybe you can talk a bit about the benefits of doing cardio and, you know, why, especially with females. You know, Ross, Ross, for example, his training is brutal. He's got like your plus sets, like extended sets.
I'll give a little bit of an overview.
5 days a week, whereas I have 4 days. I've still mostly got 2 or 3 working sets, so my training is not that hardcore, but I do have daily cardio, which he doesn't have, just for just as a stress management tool during this diet. So I don't.
So where's your cardio at now?
So 35 minutes
daily,
which he sent me today, the update. So I do feel like he's trying to kill me, but okay, it's probably going to go up from here too.
Inevitably going to go up from here. So I guess I was quite lucky. I only started out right at the start with 3 times 25 minutes, which for me, from coming from a performance background, CrossFit, honestly, the steady state cardio, it's a tickle, to be honest. It's more just time consuming. And I think where I find the challenge with the steady state cardio is just more, it's the fitting it into your day, especially now I'm on 5 times 30 minutes at this stage. He made an adjustment recently. And it's more just that, you know, there's 3 days a week where I've got both lifting and cardio. Now, I've actually back to my CrossFit days. I used to train a hell of a lot anyway, but I guess where we're at now with our business and all the other stuff we've got on our plate, it is I think the biggest challenge for us really is just been managing all of this in amongst a really busy coaching schedule, business schedule, and everything else. So I mean, it's comparatively to Mal, it seems like my cardio has been relatively actually a bigger increase, technically speaking, because you were daily from the start, whereas I was 3 times, I'm now up to 5. But like you said, the training wise, the way that Cal and I decided to run this was that we essentially started off with what was called a base level of volume. So most of my stuff also is like 2 working sets maximum, really. There's really few exercises in my plan other than really small muscle groups like rear delts, calves, etc., that maybe have 3 side delts as well. But what we kind of decided to do is we have the volume tiers, but the volume tiers are manipulated by adding additional failure points. And so we decided to go with like a rest pause method, and it's going to be on exercises where there's a hell of a lot of stability. So for example, a barbell back squat, even though I don't have that in my plan, we wouldn't do double rest pause on that because it's just far too much neurological demand. There's too much skill components, too many things that can kick in to do the work instead when fatigue's high. So think hack squat, think leg extension, think machine row, stuff that's very stable environment. He takes those movements, and for the first 2 weeks, it's just base volume. The next 2 weeks, maybe 5 or 6 exercises in the session has an additional failure point. So I would go to failure, and this is just all in the last set. Only I'd go to failure, rest 20 seconds, go to failure again. That's the plus volume. The plus volume is failure, and then the last failure point. So there's 2 additional failure points on the final set. And so he's used that as a way of kind of driving overload and progression versus adding in more sets. And you see this a lot in bodybuilding preps where they just add more and more and more as you go down the line. Now, this will tie into the question, the thing we said about the steady state cardio. Why do we do that? Why would we choose rest pause, for example, and not drop sets? Why would we go through this tiered fashion of progressing the resistance training? And then at the end, of course, we're not going to be doing that because in the last 4 to 6 weeks, that's all going to get pulled right out. Why is that? Well, it's the same reason for doing steady state cardio. One, carbohydrates and fats are inevitably going to be low at the end of a prep. Ultimately, when we look at glycogen, that's going to be the main fuel we use for our resistance training sessions. And it would also be the main fuel you would use if you were doing a lot of HIIT cardio or high intensity cardio. We keep steady state in all the way through prep because one, it's very low allostatic load, which just means our stress response to it is very low in comparison to something like HIIT. It's also going to be very non-competing with our resistance training sessions. In fact, if anything, it's actually going to provide a bit of a recovery benefit up to a point until calories get really, really low in poverty calories, which we'll be on towards the end. And the last point is just that steady state cardio uses what we call the fat oxidative pathway. So it uses fat as a substrate primarily for energy. So it uses that pathway versus using the glycolytic pathway, which uses carbohydrates as fuel more predominantly. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you're already training 4 or 5 days hard a week and you've got very precious glycogen stores to use for those things and recovery and everything else to then go ahead and use that for something like cardio. Now, I think often the big problem a lot of people have as well is you get a lot of the assisted bodybuilders, they'll often do HIIT cardio, but you've got to remember that as natural athletes, if you've not got that assisted environment, recovery is already at a premium. So you definitely can't get away with doing HIIT training. So that's really the why behind both the resistance training approach and the cardio approach is about managing fatigue as much as physically possible.
And then also if you use both tools rather than just the one, like if I hadn't done the cardio, my calories might have been even lower. So it's also a way of being able to keep food maybe relatively a little bit higher while still increasing the output side of things in a stressful way or minimally stressful way. But it's just boring and it's time consuming.
Yeah, all has its pros and cons.
So it's
I think fatigue management and managing stress ultimately is what takes priority. And so unfortunately, whether we probably both, I'd actually much prefer to do something a bit more intense, maybe intervals and things like that. But frankly speaking, it would just be far too taxing. So we've just got to go with what's optimal versus what's practical at this. Whereas I think for the Gen Pop, that's probably a good contrast to make, is that we're working with a lot of our Gen Pop clients, and especially if they're finished the fat loss phase and they're moving back towards maintenance again, the goal of a maintenance phase should be that practical almost is always going to beat out optimal. Now, you obviously try to optimize things where you can, whereas if you're going for a really advanced goal, whether it be to be a top performer in your sport, whether it be to do a photo shoot or physique competition, or even just a body transformation, optimal is going to have to start taking precedence over practical a little bit more often. And that's, I think, a good trade-off to maybe look at potentially. Yeah. Cool. So I guess we'll probably have other questions that we kind of got in, right? And so I guess one of the things that people have asked about is, what's the cravings been like?
Cravings, so I don't know, cravings for me, I feel hungry, but I don't really have any cravings. It's almost like a bit of a switch, like cravings and I just want to have a pizza, or I want to have a burger, or the kind of thing. Like I don't really think about that stuff. Like when we were eating out once or twice a week in the last kind of couple of months, obviously you still make more conscious choices. So even if I'm like, normally I would have ordered like what I really wanted from the breakfast menu because I craved that and I wanted that. But now when we're in prep, it's like I don't even think about that. I just look at what am I going to enjoy, which is still going to be easy to track. So I couldn't say that I have any cravings. Like I feel hunger, but the thing is, when you're hungry, if it's real hunger, you're just going to want to eat. Like I just want to eat something and feel good and like feel more satisfied, but I'm not craving like anything specific. This is maybe weird for people to maybe crave. I have a cravings question in my check-in every week, and what's your cravings like? And I always go, no cravings. I don't have any cravings. I feel more hungry, but I don't have cravings. Would I love to go out sometimes to just have a burger, have a pizza? Yes, of course, but it's not on the map right now. Like I stick to the plan.
It's funny. I mean, I think I'm kind of probably in the same boat.
And may I add as well, I do make sure that I factor in things that I like every single day. And this is crucial. I think, if I was told you can't have bread, you can't have pasta, you can't have anything, like I have my meringues, you can't have dairy, then my cravings would be really bad. But I'm still able to factor in a wide variety of food that I really enjoy, that I kind of get satisfaction from emotionally. So I just make sure that I do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think actually that's such a key point to touch on, because I've been thinking about this so much recently in terms of, the bodybuilding scene is not something that I certainly was that into for a long time. I always respected it. I always really was fascinated by it. But now that we're kind of in it and we're kind of doing it, I look around at what people are doing, the approaches they make, the choices they make, and I just think to myself, wow, there's still so much dogmatic, outdated beliefs around how it should be done. Luckily, our coach Cal is obviously very in tune with what actually reality looks like. And so for us, he's at no point ever said these foods are off limit, that foods are off limit, but like
you have to stick to this meal plan.
Yeah, like stick to a meal plan or whatever else. And don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of competitors that they do incredibly well with a meal plan, and that's fine if that's what ticks their boxes and works for them. But for us, like, I'm at the stage where I'm 12 weeks out, and I can just think of a few coaches who are based in Dubai, where if I was like, yeah, I'm having a bagel as part of my pre-workout and some cereal post-workout, they'd probably be like, you can't eat that, that's not prep food. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is a prep food? Because as far as I'm concerned, food is food. So
I had half a bagel today after my training. That was very pleasurable. I wish I could eat the whole bagel, but
yeah, exactly.
I ate half a bagel and it was nice. And,
so I think the key message is probably what we've done from our maintenance or our building phase to this phase is all that happened initially is right. We're going to taper down portions initially. Even at 12 weeks out, I'm only at a point now where you saying about cravings as well. I've also, it's like, there's a switch. It's like, right, there's this goal. So the craving doesn't exist anymore, because it's kind of like, well, first of all, I'm not eating it often, so I'm not getting that hyper palatability in my mouth often. Maybe the first few weeks I was a bit like, oh, it was nice going out for a burger, it's nice going out for sushi or whatever else. But to be honest, once you get into the flow of not having that stuff, you just don't really miss it, because, well, the eye's on the prize, the goal is there. And like you said, like the fact that we've been able to keep in most of the way we habitually eat anyway throughout has been a blessing in disguise, or a godsend. And I think, going into these final 12 weeks now, which is what a lot of people are going to probably think is, how do you feel about the run-in now? Because this is ultimately the business end now, right? I mean, you're the one that's done the contest prep before. You know what this is all about. This is my first time. It's my rookie year, so to speak. What I would say is, I guess, with the last adjustment I've had now, I can definitely feel like, right, this is kind of, I can feel the changes now, both physically in terms of the appearance are coming much quicker, but I'm also getting a little bit more pronounced hunger in the morning. Energy is starting to drop a lot earlier in the evening. All those sort of things are all starting to come in now. So definitely feeling the effects, but I think only from a food perspective will we now probably start really tightening it up over these coming 8 weeks. Because the thing is, it's all contextual, and that's exactly how we coach our clients, is depending on where you are, what phase you're in, what kind of amount of energy availability, how many calories you have to play with or in play, you're still always going to prioritize your nutrient dense base, but ultimately, depending on what else is left, you can have a bit more flexibility, or in our case, in these last 12 weeks, the flexibility will definitely, and the variety will come right in.
It just happens automatically. Like now, when my calories are like on my lower days, like my 1650 days, like I don't really have to still ensure that I keep full and I get my, hit my protein and I get enough, like, filling foods, nutrient dense foods in. There is not that much wiggle room for anything else. So like on my high days, I do plan in my meringue and yogurt and chocolate last meal of the day in first, because then I know, okay, this is what I have left to do the rest of my day. But on my low days, I'm kind of like, well, if I'm still hungry, like depending on where my hunger is and how I feel, I might actually choose to not have that, because I would maybe rather have oats or something like that, or something else. They're going to be more filling. So I kind of judge it as it gets lower, and as you get later into the process, I kind of switch strategy when I need to. But I wouldn't have gone into, when the diet started, I didn't start with, right, I'm just going to stop having any meals out, I'm going to stop with these things and stop with that things. It's more about process that I kind of just, with each adjustments, and based on how I feel, I adjust my actions and my habits accordingly to manage hunger and how I feel.
I think you've been able to do that so well, though, because we spent so much time not dieting, spent so much time out of dieting and maintenance, or in a building phase, where a lot of those baseline habits and that kind of intuitive listening to your body and what it needs, that's been there the whole time. So when you now come through this phase, because you're so in tune, and I feel the same, it's just very exactly it, intuitive as to what needs to be done when changes are made. You kind of know, right, okay, well, that isn't really going to be feasible anymore. I need to pull that out. Like for me, I was enjoying a few squares of dark chocolate with a bit of peanut butter as a kind of part of my last meal of the day, as a bit of a treat. And as we're now getting down to where I started off in the bulking phase, the end of the bulking phase, 100 grams of fat on non-training days and 60 on training days. I've now got 40 daily, which compared to what I'm used to is very, very little. But all we did was, right, what's the strategy now? I can't quite have my salmon in the morning or my fatty cuts of meat or fish. Those are out. So I'm looking at cod, chicken, egg whites, a little bit of egg, a little bit of fatty stuff, but not a lot. The dark chocolate came right down. I'm at a point now where I maybe have a square in the evening. But I'm probably finding in the next 2-3 weeks, especially if fats come down to 35 or even lower, that's out the equation. So you just get to a point where it's almost just like, this is probably a really inappropriate term, but natural selection. It's kind of just natural selection of what starts to come out.
So like what I might do, like maybe not yet, but maybe in 4 weeks time or so, I might do, okay, well, I'm just going to have a square of chocolate and a big bowl of frozen raspberries, maybe a little bit of yogurt raw, and just skip the meringue. Like for a few weeks, I can do that. But I'd still always make sure that I have something, like for me at the end of the day, when I've, with my cup of tea or whatever, that I can just really enjoy and savor, because I do think that's important. Also another important thing is if you're also enjoying all your main meals, like we still cook the same recipes and I enjoy all the food that we have. So if you enjoy, if you're eating like dry, disgusting chicken and salad leaves or things that
fish in a basket,
if you're eating things you don't like, then you're going to have more cravings and you're going to struggle more. But if every meal is something you enjoy, even though you have to have less of it, then you're not. And this for me is the biggest thing in terms of cravings and managing cravings, is just just have things that you enjoy. And what was the word that you used? Naturally select.
Natural selection,
change based on how you feel and based on what your targets are, if you're tracking macros and calories and things are moving quite, the adjustments are moving quite fast and stuff. So
anything else you want to touch on? Maybe, I don't know, like obviously things he's manipulated as well. Yes, there's the cardio. He hasn't really touched steps for the both of us. That's kind of just been he's kept us at baseline because
10,000 steps, I think. So which we get anyway pretty naturally. So 10,000 steps, cardio.
I can imagine he's going to start introducing like get out for a half-hour walk in the evening at some point. And so of course expenditure from this stage is going to have to increase, as his energy intake is going to have to come down. He often won't, and I think this is probably a good lesson for people, is that he often won't do both at the same time. And if he does do both at the same time, the adjustments are very small. So I think that's just something to bear in mind, is that you can't just empty all the tools out the toolbox right from the get-go. You just need to be patient, allow the response.
It's been for me like almost every second week. Like, so last week I had calorie adjustment, but no cardio adjustment. The week before I had cardio adjustment. What did I say? The other way around.
That was right.
Yeah, cardio adjustment, no calorie adjustment. This week I had cardio adjustment again, no calorie adjustment, because he adjusted my calories last week. So, and I guess depending if things move at the right rate, I don't think he's going to change it next week. So it depends on the rate of progress.
And I think that's the skill from good coaches like Cal, and also we're trying to do with our clients, is it's knowing when, like for example, in a contest prep, and this is the way I kind of describe it, is when you're working with a gym pop long-term lifestyle client, you can afford to be reactive to the changes. I wait for things to stall out and then make a change. Whereas when it comes to us, Cal needs to be proactive, because we haven't got time for things to stall. He wants to be ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, so that progress continues to keep moving. So it's kind of being proactive versus reactive is the difference there. And of course, if you had a time-based goal, like say you had, I only have 12 weeks to tidy up and drop some body fat, you might want to be more proactive than reactive.
And also Cal, he doesn't have to deal with any adherence issues. He knows that what he says we will do. So in terms of the changes, like the photos, the whatever tape measures, scale, all of that is going to be a direct reflection of what we do, and we're going to do kind of what we're asked to do. So it then makes the job a bit easier. If you're going to have to suss out, like, okay, well, I've made this adjustment, changes maybe aren't happening. Is it because there's been an adherence issue? Maybe there's been more meals out, or maybe the tracking has been wrong. So actually, it's in many cases it can be a little bit harder to work with clients who maybe aren't doing things like photo shoots and preps, because your adherence isn't going to be questionable. So but
the other thing that he's brought in as well is probably just the lipolytics. So he's obviously brought in your Himbine HCl in this prep as well, and we won't get into the technical aspect of what that is, but ultimately it's something.
You go into the technical aspect. I'm not going to talk about that, what it is, but essentially it is this, and then he goes off on a little rabbit hole. But I'm
not going to give it the whole alpha 2 that.
And now he's going to start talking about the alpha 2.
I'm not. It's but essentially what it helps is, the best way I can describe it in simple terms is this: we all have areas that we tend to hold a little bit more body fat for longer. We could almost refer to them as stubborn fat, right? So what the Yohimbine allows us to do is it allows us to kind of mobilize the fat, the energy from those fat tissues a little bit more readily. So it's essentially an assistance. People would say, oh, it's classified in the category of fat burners. Okay, to a degree, maybe it is. It does increase norepinephrine, which is a stress hormone. It does increase your thermogenesis, but the real reason it's there is just to help target some of those. For me, it's always around my love handles. That's always the area that comes off last for me. So the Yohimbine helps to kind of pull a little bit more from there than, say, if I didn't have it without. But the key thing to probably mention on top of that is that there's no point in using anything like a lipolytic aid or an ergogenic aid if you're not in a calorie deficit. So obviously we know we're in a calorie deficit. We know that's there. This is just that little bit of extra assistance that helps to pull that little 1-2% off. So he's also titrated that up as well since we've been going through prep.
Yeah. Because it's like people sometimes think, what fat loss burner should I take, or should I take X amount? Most of them don't work in the first place. They don't really do anything, but they especially won't do anything unless you're in a calorie deficit. So
and another point to that as well is you actually have to be in a condition where it actually is relevant. Like if you're carrying a lot of adiposity, i.e. that's just a fancy word for saying a lot of body fat, there is literally no point. The only people that are really in a position where they can even get a benefit from something like that is when there's body fat's low enough. And so that's why for us, we can afford to do that because, and he didn't even have it in at the start. He waited till we're a little bit into the process. Then he introduced it.
It's the first time I've used it as well. And now I'm up to quite a big dose. So I can feel it now. And I take it in the morning, like my heart rate just goes up. I can feel like the sympathetic drive from it. So yeah. Short-term thing, it's not something that you take all the time, but it just every percentage helps. Every little thing helps when everything else is already on point. So if you're not going to be on point with your calories, you're not going to be on point with your training, with your cardio, there's no point adding these sort of things on top of it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we almost speak outside of a contest scenario, obviously during a contest, first of all, we don't really drink much at the best of times, for example. We might have a beer or a glass of wine once in a while if we're not prepping, but during prep, like it wouldn't even be remotely a conversation around alcohol. And what a lot of people often do is then we get some clients who are gym pop or want to do a physique transformation. They're like, well, can I not still enjoy social drinks? I was like, well, you could, but it's really not going to be massively beneficial. And so for us, there's not even that in the equation where people are like hammering it during the week, going out the weekend, drinking, and then having a ton of food on top of that and going, what fat burner should I take? It's like, it's the wrong conversation to be having. The first conversation is going to be, will you actually need to eliminate all of that other stuff first, be compliant for a long period of time, and then we can start talking about the more advanced strategies. So I think that's worth just mentioning as well.
But it's all fun. It's all challenging, but fun. So
yeah, I think what we'll do is obviously for the
finish now soon.
For the YouTube video, what we'll probably do is we'll take our kind of starting photos and our current progress photos and put those together, because it'd be cool for people to kind of see what has actually been the physical changes so far. I'll do that for me anyway. I'll do that.
We'll see. Anyway, that's it. I think that's a good update.
Yeah, so for everyone who came and tuned in, thanks so much, and until next time.